A bullied teen refused to steal. It was the headline that changed everything for Marcus Reeves. The local newspaper sat on the kitchen counter, folded and refolded so many times the creases had begun to tear, but the headline remained clearly visible like a lifeline in the dim morning light of their apartment. His mother had circled it in red pen, her hope as vibrant as the ink against the gray newsprint. Marcus stared at it, his fingers trembling slightly as they traced over the words. A scholarship, a chance, something that felt impossibly far from the reality of his life. Outside, the November wind rattled the thin windows of their two-bedroom apartment in East Bridgeford. The heating had been temperamental for weeks, leaving a persistent chill that seeped through the walls and settled in their bones. Marcus pulled his threadbare hoodie tighter around his slender frame, trying to capture whatever warmth he could before facing another day at Bridgeford High. His mother had already left for her early shift at the hospital cafeteria. Her note beside the newspaper was simple. You deserve this chance. Apply. I believe in you. The words blurred as his eyes welled with unexpected tears. Belief was a luxury they couldn't often afford in this household, but somehow his mother managed to keep it in abundant supply. The scholarship was offered by Bridgeford's most enigmatic resident, Theodore Winters, the elderly founder of Winters Technologies, who had retired to their small town for reasons nobody quite understood. The application requirements were minimal, almost suspiciously so. No essays, no transcripts, just a name and contact information. The newspaper mentioned something about character assessment being the primary criteria, whatever that meant. Marcus folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his backpack. He would apply if only to give his mother something to hope for, but experience had taught him that opportunities didn't simply appear for kids from the east side of Bridgeford, especially not for the quiet ones who tried to remain invisible. And invisibility had been Marcus's superpower since freshman year, when Drew Callahan and his friends had decided that Marcus's secondhand clothes, his stutter when nervous, and his perfect test scores made him the perfect target for their particular brand of entertainment. The school bus was already crowded when Marcus climbed aboard, his eyes fixed on the floor as he navigated the narrow aisle to an empty seat near the back. The usual whispers and snickers followed him like shadows, but he had learned to tune them out, to exist in the bubble of his own making. Hey, scholarship boy. Drew's voice cut through Marcus's mental armor, sharp and precise. Heard you're applying for Old Man Winter's charity case fund. Marcus kept his eyes down, fingers gripping the straps of his backpack until his knuckles whitened. News traveled fast in a town the size of Bridgeford. Too fast. You really think he's going to pick you? Drew continued, leaning across the aisle. His Letterman jacket strained against broad shoulders, built from years of football training. You can barely afford decent shoes. The bus lurched forward, saving Marcus from having to respond. He pressed his forehead against the cool window glass, watching his neighborhood recede behind them. The east side, with its apartment complexes and discount stores, gave way to the tree-lined streets of central Bridgeford, where houses stood proudly with manicured lawns and multiple cars in driveways. And then as they turned onto Oak Ridge Drive, the Winters estate came into view. Set back from the road, partially hidden behind an ornate iron gate and a row of ancient oak trees, the mansion seemed to exist in a different realm altogether. Rumors about Theodore Winters swirled constantly among the students, that he was eccentric, possibly a genius, definitely a recluse. The most persistent rumor was that he watched the town from cameras hidden throughout Bridgeford, observing potential scholarship recipients from afar. Marcus dismissed the thought as ridiculous. Nobody would invest that much effort in a small-town scholarship program. Still, he couldn't help but stare as the bus passed the property, wondering what kind of life existed behind those gates. Bridgeford High loomed ahead, a sprawling brick building that housed just over 800 students. For some, it was a launching pad to greater things. For Marcus, it was a daily endurance test, a series of moments to be survived rather than lived. Mrs. Chen's physics class was his first sanctuary of the day. Here, among equations and theories, Marcus found a measure of peace. His mind, sharp and intuitive with numbers, could momentarily forget the reality of his life outside these walls. He slid into his usual seat by the window, pulled out his notebook, a composition book with physics written neatly on the cover, and lost himself in the previous day's notes. I see someone's prepared as always, Mrs. Chen said as she passed his desk, her voice carrying a warmth that few teachers managed to maintain by November. She placed a graded quiz face down on his desk. Excellent work as usual, Marcus. He turned over the paper to see a 98% marked in red at the top. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. His first of the day. Physics made sense in a way people rarely did. Predictable, consistent, governed by laws that didn't change based on your zip code or the brand of your clothes. "Hey," a voice whispered from his right. "Did you apply for that winter scholarship thing?" Marcus turned to see Eliza Navarro watching him with curious eyes. With her perpetually ink-stained fingers and collection of science fiction novels, Eliza occupied a social tier slightly above Marcus. Not popular enough to be untouchable, but smart enough to be respected rather than ridiculed. "Not yet," he answered, surprised by the lack of stutter in his voice. Something about Eliza had always put him at ease, perhaps because she had never once joined in when others targeted him. "You should," she said, twirling a pencil between her fingers. "My brother applied 3 years ago. Didn't get it, but said the whole process was weird. Like not normal scholarship stuff." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Mrs. Chen called the class to attention, and the moment passed. But Eliza's words lingered, adding another layer to the mystery surrounding Theodore Winters and his scholarship. The morning crawled by, each class bleeding into the next until lunch period arrived. The cafeteria, with its unwritten seating chart and social landmines, was another battlefield to navigate. Marcus usually ate quickly at a corner table, or when the weather permitted, outside on the steps behind the gymnasium where few students ventured. Today, however, the steady November rain trapped everyone indoors. Marcus found a seat at the end of a table populated by chess club members who largely ignored his presence. He unwrapped the sandwich his mother had prepared, peanut butter and banana, their version of luxury when the budget allowed for fresh fruit. He had just taken his first bite when Drew and his friends surrounded him, their trays clattering against the table as they claimed the empty seats. "So I've been thinking," Drew said, his voice carrying that false friendliness that always preceded something cruel. "If you want that scholarship so bad, you probably need to make yourself stand out, right? Show old man Winters you've got what it takes." Marcus kept his eyes on his sandwich, chewing methodically. 120 seconds. That was his average time to eat lunch when Drew was present. 2 minutes, and then he could leave without drawing more attention. "I've got a proposition for you," Drew continued, leaning in closer. "A way to prove your scholarship material." Against his better judgment, Marcus glanced up. Drew was smiling, but the expression didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold and calculating. "The chem lab. Miss Barker keeps those new graphing calculators locked in her cabinet. I need one for the test tomorrow, but she won't let us borrow them overnight." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knew where this was headed. "You stay after school for that tutoring thing, right? You've got access. Just borrow one for me, and I'll return it tomorrow." "No one will know." "That's stealing," Marcus said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Drew's smile hardened. "It's borrowing. And I thought we were friends, Marcus. Friends help each other out." The table had gone silent, chess club members suddenly engrossed in their lunches, pretending not to hear. This was how it always worked. Witnesses who saw nothing, heard nothing, said nothing. "I can't," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Ms. Barker trusts me." Drew's expression darkened. "You think you're better than me? Too good to help a friend?" "We're not friends." The words hung in the air between them, a truth finally spoken aloud. For a moment, shock flashed across Drew's face, quickly replaced by something harder, more dangerous. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "You'll regret that scholarship, boy. Nobody says no to me." As Drew and his friends stalked away, Marcus released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His heart hammered against his ribs, and a cold sweat had broken out across his forehead. He'd never directly refused Drew before. The deviation from their usual script, Marcus's silent acceptance of whatever was thrown his way, felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. Marcus kept expecting retaliation, flinching at locker doors slamming and watching for Drew's approach in the hallways. But nothing happened, which somehow felt worse. Drew wasn't known for letting things go. By the time the final bell rang, Marcus's nerves were frayed. He made his way to the chemistry lab for his tutoring session with Ms. Barker, constantly glancing over his shoulder. The science wing was nearly empty, most students having rushed to freedom the moment school ended. Miss Barker was organizing papers at her desk when he arrived. "Ah, Marcus. Right on time as always." She smiled warmly, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "I have a student coming for help with balancing equations. Do you mind starting her off while I finish grading these quizzes?" Marcus nodded, settling his backpack on a lab stool. The routine was familiar. Twice a week he helped Ms. Barker with struggling students, explaining concepts in the patient, methodical way that came naturally to him. It was the one place in school where his intelligence was an asset rather than a liability. The door opened, and to Marcus's surprise, Eliza walked in. "Hey," she said, offering a small wave. "I'm your remedial case today." "You don't need remedial help," Marcus said, confusion evident in his voice. Eliza was easily one of the top students in their grade. She shrugged, sliding onto the stool next to his. "Maybe I just wanted an excuse to talk to the mysterious Marcus Reeves without the whole school watching." Heat crept up Marcus's neck, unfamiliar and uncomfortable. He busied himself arranging the textbook and notebook, unsure how to respond. People, especially people like Eliza, didn't seek out his company. "I heard what happened at lunch," she said quietly, her eyes serious. "With Drew." Marcus tensed. "It wasn't a big deal. Standing up to Drew Callahan? That's definitely a big deal." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Be careful, okay? He doesn't handle rejection well." Before Marcus could respond, the lab door banged open and Drew sauntered in, a smile plastered across his face that immediately set Marcus on edge. "Ms. Barker!" Drew called out, all charm and easy confidence. "Just the teacher I was hoping to see." "Ms." Barker looked up from her grading, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Mr. Callahan, this is unexpected. Do you need help with tomorrow's test?" "Actually," Drew said, moving further into the room, eyes flickering briefly to Marcus. "I wanted to borrow one of those new calculators for some extra practice tonight. Coach says I need to keep my grades up if I want to stay team captain." "Miss." Barker's expression softened slightly. "Well, I appreciate your dedication, but I'm afraid those calculators don't leave the classroom. School policy." Drew's smile dimmed fractionally. "I understand, but maybe, just this once, I'd bring it back first thing tomorrow." "Mrs." Barker shook her head firmly. "I'm sorry, but rules are rules. You're welcome to use one now if you'd like to stay in practice." Drew's eyes darted to Marcus, a clear message in them. This was the moment Marcus could speak up, offer to sneak a calculator out later, ingratiate himself with Drew, and potentially end months of torment. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even Eliza had gone still beside him. "Actually, Ms. Barker," Marcus found himself saying, "I could help Drew now if he wants to stay. We're just starting, and the equations aren't too complicated." Drew's face contorted briefly before smoothing back into practiced nonchalance. "Thanks, but I've got practice. I'll figure something out." He backed toward the door, eyes never leaving Marcus. "See you tomorrow." The threat was clear in those last words, hanging in the air long after Drew had gone. Miss Barker, oblivious to the undercurrents, returned to her grading. "Well then, let's get to work, shall we?" Eliza nudged Marcus gently. "That was brave," she whispered. "Stupid maybe, but brave." Marcus couldn't tell if the pounding in his chest was fear or something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to pride. The tutoring session passed quickly, though Marcus found it hard to concentrate with Eliza sitting so close. Her questions far too insightful for someone supposedly struggling with the material. By the time they finished, the sky outside had darkened completely, and rain continued to streak the windows. "Do you need a ride home?" Eliza asked as they packed up their books. "My mom's picking me up in 5 minutes." Marcus hesitated. The bus would have left by now, meaning a long, wet walk home. But accepting rides from classmates was uncharted territory. "I don't want to inconvenience your mom," he said finally. Eliza rolled her eyes. "It's pouring, Marcus. Just say yes." Before he could respond, Ms. Barker approached, holding out a piece of paper. "Marcus, I almost forgot. This came for you from the office." He took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a simple note on Bridgeford High letterhead. "Please report to Conference Room B tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. regarding your winter scholarship application. Principal Davis." "What is it?" Eliza asked, peering over his shoulder. "Something about the winter scholarship," Marcus replied, confusion evident in his voice. "But I haven't even applied yet." "Miss." Barker smiled knowingly. "Well, it seems someone has noticed you anyway. Theodore Winters has his own way of doing things." Marcus reread the note, a mixture of hope and suspicion swirling in his stomach. How could he be called in about an application he hadn't submitted? And why the early morning meeting before other students would be around? "That's great," Eliza said, her genuine enthusiasm breaking through his thoughts. "See? I told you to apply." "But I didn't," Marcus insisted, tucking the note into his pocket. "That's what's weird, Miss." Barker patted his shoulder as she headed for the door. "Don't overthink it, Marcus. Sometimes good things happen when we least expect them." She flipped off the lights, prompting them to follow her into the hallway. "Lock up when you leave, please." Left alone in the dimly lit corridor, Marcus and Eliza stood in awkward silence for a moment. "So, that ride?" Eliza finally said. Marcus nodded, suddenly too exhausted to maintain his usual walls. The day had been a roller coaster, from the newspaper article that morning to standing up to Drew, and now this mysterious summons about a scholarship he hadn't applied for. They walked to the front entrance together, Eliza filling the silence with easy chatter about her latest science fiction obsession. Outside, the rain had eased to a gentle drizzle, and a sleek blue sedan waited by the curb, hazard lights blinking steadily. "That's my mom," Eliza said, hurrying toward the car. Marcus followed more slowly, his natural caution reasserting itself. Eliza's mother rolled down the window as they approached, her smile warm and curious. "You must be Marcus. Hop in, it's too wet to stand around chatting." The interior of the car was warm and smelled faintly of vanilla. Marcus slid into the back seat, acutely aware of his damp clothes and worn backpack. "Where to?" Eliza's mother asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Oakwood Apartments," he answered quietly. "On 7th Street. If she recognized this as one of the poorer addresses in town, she gave no indication. 7th Street it is. I'm Diana, by the way. Eliza talks about you all the time." "Mom!" Eliza protested from the front seat, a flush creeping up her neck. "What hunt? You do? Marcus this, Marcus that. Especially since you started that physics project." Marcus blinked in surprise. The only interaction he and Eliza had in physics class was the occasional borrowed pencil or shared textbook. The idea that she talked about him at home was bewildering. The drive to his apartment complex was mercifully short. As Diana pulled up to the entrance, Marcus thanked her awkwardly. "Anytime," she said, her smile genuine. "And good luck with that scholarship meeting tomorrow." "Thanks," he mumbled, sliding out of the car. "See you tomorrow, Eliza." Eliza waved, her expression unreadable in the dim evening light. "Don't overthink it, Marcus. Just be yourself tomorrow." Easy for her to say, he thought as he trudged up the walkway to his building. Being himself had never seemed like enough before. The apartment was dark and empty when he unlocked the door. His mother wouldn't be home for hours yet. Her shift at the hospital cafeteria ran late on Tuesdays. Marcus flipped on the lights and headed straight for the kitchen, where he rummaged through the refrigerator for dinner options. The pickings were slim: half a carton of eggs, some wilted lettuce, and a container of leftovers from Sunday's spaghetti dinner. He opted for the spaghetti, spooning it into a bowl and heating it in the microwave. While he waited, he pulled out the mysterious note about the scholarship meeting. The paper was crisp and official, the principal's signature clearly visible at the bottom. It was legitimate, at least in terms of coming from the school, but the whole situation felt off. Why would he be called in about a scholarship he hadn't applied for? And why at 7:30 in the morning, before regular school hours? The microwave beeped, interrupting his thoughts. Marcus ate mechanically at the small kitchen table, his mind still spinning with possibilities. Perhaps someone had applied on his behalf, his mother or maybe Mrs. Chen, who had always taken a special interest in his academic future. Or maybe it was all an elaborate prank orchestrated by Drew. That thought sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the apartment's faulty heating. After dinner, Marcus tried to focus on homework, but concentration eluded him. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. The newspaper article, confronting Drew, Eliza's unexpected friendliness, and now this mysterious meeting. It was more social interaction and drama than he typically experienced in a month. Eventually, he gave up on trigonometry and sprawled across his bed, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars, remnants from his childhood, formed constellations only he recognized. His own private universe, mapped out when he was 10 and still believed in possibilities beyond Bridgeford. The sound of keys in the lock roused him from his thoughts. He glanced at the clock, 10:17 p.m. His mother was home earlier than expected. "Marcus," her voice called from the entryway, tired but warm. "In here," he answered, pushing himself up from the bed. She appeared in his doorway, still wearing her cafeteria uniform, her dark hair escaping from its neat bun. Despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, she smiled at the sight of him. "How was your day?" It was their nightly ritual, this exchange of questions that often received only the most superficial answers. Neither wanted to burden the other with the full weight of their struggles. Tonight, however, Marcus found himself wanting to share. "I got called in for a meeting about that scholarship. The Winters one." His mother's eyes widened, fatigue momentarily forgotten. "You applied already? That's wonderful." "That's the thing," Marcus said, handing her the note. "I didn't apply, but they want to see me tomorrow morning anyway." She read the note carefully, her brow furrowing in confusion. That's unusual, but it must be good news, right? Maybe someone recommended you. Maybe. Marcus agreed, not wanting to dampen her obvious excitement. I'll find out tomorrow. She sat beside him on the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under their combined weight. I'm proud of you, you know. Regardless of what happens with this scholarship, the simple statement caught him off guard, lodging somewhere in his chest like a physical thing. I haven't done anything special. She shook her head, reaching out to brush his hair back from his forehead, in a gesture so tender it almost hurt. You get up every day and face that school with your head high, despite everything. That's special, Marcus. That's strength. He looked away, uncomfortable with her praise and the emotion it stirred. If she knew how he actually navigated school, head down, invisible, surviving rather than thriving, would she still think him strong? Get some sleep, she said, standing with a small groan that betrayed her exhaustion. Big day tomorrow. Long after she had gone to bed, Marcus lay awake, watching the faint outline of his star constellations as they absorbed the day's light and gave it back in a soft, greenish glow. Tomorrow loomed ahead, full of unknowns. The scholarship meeting, Drew's inevitable retaliation, Eliza's inexplicable friendliness. For a boy who had structured his life around predictability and invisibility, it was terrifying. And yet beneath the fear lay something else, a tiny flicker of possibility that had been missing for so long he barely recognized it. Hope. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through thin curtains and the distant sound of his mother moving quietly in the kitchen. Marcus blinked awake, momentarily disoriented before remembering the scholarship meeting. 7:30 a.m. He dressed with unusual care, selecting his least worn jeans and a navy sweater his mother had splurged on for his birthday. In the bathroom mirror, he attempted to tame his unruly dark hair, then gave up after a few minutes. Some battles weren't worth fighting. His mother had left breakfast on the table, toast with peanut butter and a banana, alongside a note wishing him luck. She would have already left for her early shift, but her presence lingered in these small gestures of care. Marcus ate quickly, his stomach tight with nerves. The clock on the microwave read 6:45 a.m. Plenty of time to walk to school for the 7:30 meeting. Outside, the world was washed clean by the previous day's rain, the November air crisp and cold in his lungs as he began the familiar trek to Bridgeford High. The school looked different in the early morning light, quieter, almost peaceful without the usual crush of students. The main entrance was unlocked, though the hallways were largely deserted except for a few teachers preparing for the day. Conference Room B was located in the administrative wing, a part of the school Marcus rarely had reason to visit. He found it easily enough. A small room with a polished table and 6 chairs, currently occupied by Principal Davis and a man Marcus didn't recognize. He hesitated in the doorway, suddenly unsure. "Ah, Marcus," Principal Davis said, rising from his chair. "Right on time. Please come in." Marcus stepped into the room, his gaze drawn to the stranger, an elderly man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight through him. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and influence, his posture straight despite his advanced age. "Marcus Reeves," the man said, his voice surprisingly strong. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. I'm Theodore Winters." Marcus froze, momentarily speechless. Theodore Winters, the reclusive billionaire, the man whose name graced the mysterious scholarship, the subject of countless town rumors, was sitting in Conference Room B, apparently waiting for him. "Sir," Marcus managed, the word coming out as little more than a whisper. "Please sit down," Winters said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We have much to discuss." Principal Davis cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. Mr. Winters has requested privacy for this interview." He nodded encouragingly at Marcus before slipping out of the room, closing the door behind him. Alone with Theodore Winters, Marcus lowered himself carefully into the indicated chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their trembling. Winters studied him for a long moment, those sharp blue eyes missing nothing. "Do you know why you're here, Marcus?" "The scholarship," Marcus answered, finding his voice at last. "But I never applied." A smile touched the corners of Winters' mouth. "That's correct. You didn't need to." Confusion must have shown on Marcus's face because Winters continued. "My scholarship isn't something students apply for in the traditional sense. I select candidates based on my own criteria. After a period of observation, a chill ran down Marcus's spine. The rumors about hidden cameras suddenly seemed less ridiculous. "You've been watching me?" Winters chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. Not in the invasive way you're imagining. Let's just say I have sources within the school who report on students who might meet my requirements. What requirements? Marcus asked, curiosity temporarily overcoming his nervousness. Character, Winters said simply. Intelligence is common enough. Good grades, athletic ability, artistic talent. Many students possess these qualities. But character, true integrity, especially when tested, that's far rarer. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't understand. Winters leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Yesterday in the chemistry lab after school, you were asked to steal a calculator. Marcus's blood ran cold. How did you? As I said, I have sources. Winters interrupted smoothly. What matters is that you refused, despite the potential consequences to yourself. You chose integrity over self-preservation or social acceptance. Anyone would have done the same, Marcus muttered, embarrassed by the praise. No, Winters said firmly. They wouldn't. I've been testing students in similar ways for years, Marcus. Most fail. They choose the easy path, the safe option, the road that leads to social approval rather than the hard right over the easy wrong. The implication slowly dawned on Marcus. It was a test? Drew asking me to steal the calculator? Winters sat back, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. Not directly. Drew Callahan acted of his own accord there. But the situation presented an opportunity to observe your character under pressure. My ... Associate was present and witnessed your choice. Marcus's mind raced, trying to piece together who could have been reporting to Winters. Mrs. Barker? Eliza? Some invisible observer he hadn't even noticed? Scholarship, Winters continued, drawing Marcus' attention back to the present. Offers full tuition to any college of your choice, plus a living stipend and book allowance. It's awarded to one Bridgeford student each year, selected solely by me based on character demonstrations that often go unnoticed by others. The magnitude of what Winters was saying began to sink in. Full college tuition, a way out of Bridgeford, a future his mother couldn't have dreamed of providing, no matter how many extra shifts she worked. Why? Marcus asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. Why do this? Something shifted in Winters' expression, a softening around the eyes, a distant look that suggested memories long kept private. Because character matters more than circumstance, Marcus. Because I was once a boy from the wrong side of town, with nothing to my name but my integrity. And because someone once saw value in that, when no one else did. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. This contains the official scholarship offer and all the necessary paperwork. Take it home, discuss it with your mother. If you accept, return the signed documents to Principal Davis by Friday. Marcus stared at the envelope, hardly daring to touch it. Just like that? I didn't even have to apply or interview or... You've been interviewing for months without realizing it, Winters said, standing abruptly. Every choice you've made, every time you've demonstrated kindness, honesty, or courage when you thought no one was watching, those were your application essays. He extended his hand across the table. After a moment of stunned hesitation, Marcus stood and shook it, the older man's grip firm and warm. Thank you, Marcus said, the words utterly inadequate for the emotion swelling in his chest. I don't know what else to say. Your actions have already said everything that matters. Winters replied, now you should probably head to class. The bell will ring soon. As if on cue, the distant sound of students arriving filtered through the door. The regular school day was beginning, reality reasserting itself after what felt like a dream sequence. Marcus carefully picked up the envelope, sliding it into his backpack with reverent hands. Will I see you again? To thank you properly, I mean. Winters smiled, the expression transforming his stern features into something almost grandfatherly. Perhaps. I tend to keep my distance these days, but I'll be watching your progress with great interest, Marcus Reeves. The corridor outside was beginning to fill with students. When Marcus emerged from conference room B, he moved through the growing crowd in a daze, the weight of the envelope in his backpack both literal and metaphorical, a tangible promise of a future he had stopped allowing himself to imagine. Hey! Eliza's voice cut through his thoughts. She was standing by his locker, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. How did it go? The meeting? Marcus stared at her, suddenly suspicious. Were you part of it? The test? Her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Test? What are you talking about? The confusion on her face seemed too authentic to be feigned. Whatever role Winters' sources had played, Eliza apparently wasn't among them. Never mind. he said, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. The meeting went, well, really well, actually. So you got it? The scholarship? Her excitement was palpable, a bright energy that drew the attention of nearby students. Marcus nodded, still not quite believing it himself. Full tuition. Any college I want. Eliza's squeal of delight echoed down the hallway, causing several heads to turn. Without warning, she threw her arms around him in a quick, fierce hug that left him momentarily stunned. I knew it, she said, pulling back but keeping her hands on his shoulders. I absolutely knew you'd get it. Before Marcus could respond, a familiar voice cut through their moment of celebration. Well, if it isn't scholarship, boy, suddenly too important to follow the rules. Drew Callahan approached, flanked by two of his usual companions. His eyes, cold and calculating, flicked between Marcus and Eliza, noting their proximity with obvious displeasure. What are you talking about, Drew? Eliza asked, her hands dropping from Marcus's shoulders. Our friend here, Drew said, jerking his chin toward Marcus, got caught stealing a calculator from the chem lab yesterday. Principal Davis is looking for him right now. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. That's a lie. I refuse to steal anything. Drew's smile was shark-like. That's not what Miss Barker's aide says. She saw you slip a calculator into your backpack after everyone left. He shrugged with exaggerated casualness. But hey, maybe they'll let you keep that fancy scholarship even after you're expelled for theft. Eliza stepped forward, eyes flashing. Nobody's going to believe that, Drew. Everyone knows Marcus wouldn't steal. Do they? Drew countered, his gaze sweeping the growing crowd of onlookers. Or do they just see another desperate kid from the east side, willing to do anything to get ahead? The whisper started immediately, rippling through the gathered students like a poisonous tide. Marcus stood frozen, the reality of what was happening crashing over him in waves. Drew was setting him up, using the very thing he had refused to do against him. And people would believe it. That was the worst part. In a school divided by invisible lines of class and privilege, it would be all too easy to believe that the quiet, poor kid had finally snapped and taken something that wasn't his. The scholarship paperwork in his backpack suddenly felt like a time bomb rather than a gift. If this accusation gained traction, if it reached Theodore Winters, Marcus Reeves, a stern voice called from down the hallway. Vice Principal Hargrove, a tall woman with perpetually pursed lips, was making her way through the parting crowd. Come with me, please. Drew's triumphant smirk made Marcus's stomach clench. This was it, the accusation made official, his word against whatever evidence Drew had manufactured. He didn't do anything. Eliza protested as Hargrove reached them. Drew is lying. That's enough, Miss Navarro. Hargrove said sharply. This doesn't concern you. She fixed her stern gaze on Marcus. Mr. Reeves, please come with me now. With leaden feet, Marcus followed her through the whispering crowd, acutely aware of the stares burning into his back. The scholarship, his future, his mother's hope, all of it balanced on a knife's edge because he had dared to say no to Drew Callahan. Hargrove led him not to the principal's office as expected, but back to conference room B. She opened the door without knocking, revealing Theodore Winters still seated at the table, now joined by Principal Davis and, to Marcus's shock, Ms. Barker. He's here, Hargrove announced, stepping aside to let Marcus enter. Thank you, Sharon, Principal Davis said. Please close the door on your way out. The vice principal departed, leaving Marcus standing awkwardly before the three adults, confusion warring with dread in his mind. Sit down, Marcus. Ms. Barker said gently, patting the chair beside her. Everything's all right, but Drew said, he's telling everyone I stole a calculator. Marcus said, remaining standing. He said your aide saw me. Ms. Barker's eyes flashed with anger. I don't have an aide, Marcus. That's a complete fabrication. We're aware of Mr. Callahan's accusations, Principal Davis added, his tone grave. And we've already determined them to be false. Marcus sank slowly into the offered chair, relief washing over him in a dizzying wave. You believe me? Of course we do, Ms. Barker said firmly. I was there, remember? I know you refused to take anything. Theodore Winters, who had been watching the exchange in silence, finally spoke. It seems our young friend Mr. Callahan is more vindictive than I anticipated. Creating false accusations is a serious matter. It will be addressed, Principal Davis assured him. Drew Callahan's behavior has been problematic for some time. This incident provides the documentation we need for serious disciplinary action. Marcus struggled to process what was happening. Instead of being accused, he was being defended. Instead of losing the scholarship, He was watching as the adults around him, powerful, influential adults, prepared to protect him from Drew's lies. "Why am I here?" he finally asked. "If you already knew the accusation was false, Miss..." Barker placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I saw Drew and his friends gathering in the hallway this morning, looking entirely too pleased with themselves. I suspected they might be planning something against you, especially after yesterday's confrontation. So I alerted Principal Davis. And I," Winters added, "happened to still be on campus for our meeting. When I heard what was transpiring, I requested your presence here to spare you the public spectacle that Mr. Callahan was clearly hoping to create." Marcus looked between the three adults, a lump forming in his throat. For years, he had navigated the treacherous waters of high school alone, believing that no one noticed or cared about the daily injustices he endured. And now, in the space of 24 hours, multiple people had stepped forward to shield him. "Thank you," he managed, the words barely audible. "You should know," Principal Davis said, leaning forward with an unusually gentle expression, "that Drew Callahan has been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. The false accusation of theft against another student is a serious violation of our school's honor code." "But, Marcus hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Won't his parents fight it?" "His dad's on the school board." A small, satisfied smile crossed Principal Davis's face. "As it happens, Mr. Winters here has considerable influence with our school board as well." His ... perspective on the situation was quite persuasive. Winters waved a dismissive hand. "I merely suggested that a school which cannot protect students of Marcus's character might not be worthy of my continued financial support." The implication hung in the air, crystal clear. Theodore Winters wielded enough power through his donations to ensure that even the Callahan family's influence would not protect Drew this time. "The bell for first period is already rung," Principal Davis said, glancing at his watch. "But under the circumstances, I think we can excuse your tardiness, Marcus. Missy, Barker has agreed to escort you to class to head off any further incidents." Marcus nodded, still somewhat dazed by the rapid shift in his fortunes. As he stood to leave, Winters caught his eye. "Remember what I said earlier, Marcus? Character matters more than circumstance. Today has only confirmed what I already knew about yours." The words settled like a warm weight on Marcus's shoulders. Not a burden, but an affirmation. Someone had seen him, truly seen him, and found value in who he was, not what he lacked. As he followed Ms. Barker into the now empty hallway, Marcus felt something unfamiliar unfurling in his chest. For years, he had made himself small, invisible, hoping merely to survive until graduation. But now, with the scholarship envelope secure in his backpack and the unexpected alliance of adults who believed in him, a different future began to take shape in his mind. Not just survival, but possibility. Not just endurance, but growth. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Reeves walked the halls of Bridgeford High with his head held high. Word of Drew's suspension spread through the school like wildfire, reaching Marcus before lunch period even began. The whispers followed him still, but their tone had shifted. Curiosity rather than condemnation. Respect rather than ridicule. In the cafeteria, Eliza waved him over to her table, surrounded by her usual friends from the science club. They made room for him without hesitation, as if he had always belonged there. "Is it true?" Eliza asked as he sat down. "Drew got suspended because he tried to frame you." Marcus nodded, still processing the morning's events himself. 3 days suspension, and he has to write me a formal apology. One of Eliza's friends, Marcus thought his name was Jaden, whistled low. "Damn, nobody's ever taken down Drew Callahan before." "How'd you do it?" "I didn't," Marcus said honestly. "I just refused to steal something when he asked me to. And then Theodore Winters himself showed up to defend you." Eliza added, her eyes bright with excitement. "The whole school's talking about it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't that dramatic, but it was in a way. The reclusive billionaire had personally intervened on his behalf. Principal Davis had sided with him over the son of a school board member. Ms. Barker had believed in his character without question. After years of invisibility, Marcus suddenly found himself seen, not just by bullies looking for a target, but by people who recognized something in him worth defending. As lunch progressed, he found himself drawn into the conversation around the table. Debates about the latest sci-fi show, complaints about their calculus teacher's impossible tests, plans for an upcoming science fair. They included him effortlessly, as if he had always been part of their circle. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, Marcus realized he had laughed more in those 45 minutes than he had in months. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Teachers who had previously looked through him now nodded in recognition as he entered their classrooms. Students who had never spared him a glance now offered tentative smiles in the hallways. It was as if the invisible shield he had built around himself had suddenly become transparent, allowing others to see the person behind it. After his last class, Marcus found Eliza waiting by his locker, a conspiratorial smile on her face. "Walk with me?" she asked, falling into step beside him before he could answer. "I have something to tell you." Outside, the November afternoon was crisp and clear, the earlier clouds having given way to pale sunshine. They headed toward the student parking lot, their breaths forming small clouds in the cold air. "So," Eliza said once they were away from the main crowd, "I have a confession to make." Marcus glanced at her, suddenly wary. "What kind of confession?" She bit her lip, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I might have known a little more about the winter scholarship than I let on." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "What do you mean?" "My brother didn't just apply for it 3 years ago," she said, the words coming in a rush. "He got it. He's at MIT now because of Theodore Winters." Marcus stared at her, pieces clicking into place. "Your brother was a Winters scholar? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because part of the deal is that recipients don't talk about how the selection process works," she explained. "It's all very secretive. But when I saw that article about the scholarship in the paper, I had a feeling you'd be perfect for it." "So you've been watching me? Reporting to Winters?" The thought made him uncomfortable, reminding him too much of Drew's manipulations. "No," Eliza said quickly. "Nothing like that. I just noticed how you never cheated even when everyone else did. How you helped that freshman who was being bullied last month. How you tutor other students even though you could be using that time for your own work." She shrugged, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I might have mentioned to my brother that I knew someone who embodied the kind of character Mr. Winters looks for. After that, I don't know what happened. I wasn't part of any test." Marcus absorbed this information slowly, unsure how to feel about it. On one hand, it meant Eliza's sudden friendliness might have had ulterior motives. On the other, she had seen something in him worth championing long before the scholarship entered the picture. "Why tell me now?" he finally asked. Her smile returned, slightly hesitant. "Because you got it. Because it doesn't matter anymore if I break the secrecy rules a little. And because," she hesitated, then continued more softly, "because I want us to be friends for real. No secrets, no agendas. Friends." The word hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. For so long, Marcus had existed on the periphery of Bridgeford High's social world, neither seeking nor receiving true friendship. The offer, coming now amid all the other changes in his life, felt like yet another door opening onto a future he had stopped imagining. "I'd like that," he said finally, surprised by how much he meant it. Eliza's smile widened, relief evident in her eyes. Good. Then as your friend, I'm officially inviting you to celebration dinner at my house tonight. My mom already called your mom, and she said it's okay." "Wait, what?" Marcus blinked in surprise. "Your mom called my mom?" "Yep. Apparently they hit it off when she drove you home yesterday." Eliza grinned at his bewildered expression. "You didn't think I was the only one plotting your social resurrection, did you? My mom's been trying to get your mom to let you come over for dinner for weeks." The idea that multiple people had been quietly working behind the scenes to draw him out of his isolation was almost too much to process. For years, Marcus had believed himself largely invisible to the world around him. Now he was discovering that he had been seen all along, by Eliza, by her family, by Theodore Winters, by teachers who recognized his potential. "So," Eliza prompted when he remained silent. "Dinner? Mom's making her famous lasagna, and my brother's driving home from college to meet you, the newest member of the exclusive Winter Scholars Club." Marcus found himself nodding, a smile spreading across his face despite his lingering disbelief. "Okay, dinner sounds good." "Great." She bounced slightly on her toes, radiating enthusiasm. "My mom will pick us both up at 6. Don't worry about dressing fancy or anything. We're pretty casual." As they reached the edge of the parking lot, Eliza's phone buzzed with a text. "That's my ride," she said, glancing at the screen. "See you at 6. "See you at 6, Marcus confirmed, watching as she hurried toward a waiting car, waving over her shoulder. Left alone, he turned toward home, his mind still processing the day's revelations. The scholarship that would change his future, Drew's suspension and impending apology, Eliza's friendship offered without conditions, her family's unexpected interest in his welfare, and beneath it all, the simple fact that it started everything. His refusal to steal a calculator, a small act of integrity that most would consider unremarkable. A bullied teen refused to steal. The newspaper headline his mother had circled now seemed prophetic rather than aspirational. A simple choice, made in a moment of pressure, had set in motion a chain of events that was already reshaping his life. As Marcus walked home through the familiar streets of East Bridgeford, the late afternoon sun cast his shadow long before him. Not the hunched, defensive silhouette he had grown accustomed to seeing, but something taller, straighter, more defined, a shape that looked surprisingly like the future he had stopped allowing himself to imagine. The apartment was empty when he arrived, his mother still at work for another hour. Marcus dropped his backpack on the kitchen table and carefully extracted the scholarship envelope, running his fingers over the heavy cream-colored paper embossed with the Winters Foundation logo. Inside was more than just financial assistance for college. It was validation, opportunity, a bridge to a different life. Not just for him, but for his mother as well. No more 60-hour work weeks just to keep their heads above water. No more choosing between heating and groceries in the winter months. No more deferring dreams because reality demanded all their resources. Marcus spread the documents across the table, reading each page carefully. Full tuition to any accredited university. A living stipend generous enough to cover housing and meals. An additional allowance for books and supplies. And perhaps most surprising, a separate fund designated for his mother, family support, the paperwork called it, that would provide a monthly stipend equivalent to nearly half her current income for the duration of his undergraduate education. Theodore Winters had thought of everything, creating not just a scholarship but a comprehensive support system designed to remove every financial barrier between Marcus and his education. By the time his mother's key turned in the lock an hour later, Marcus had read every word of the agreement twice, still hardly believing what it offered. "Marcus?" she called, her voice carrying the weight of a long day's work. "Are you home?" "In the kitchen," he answered, gathering the papers into a neat stack. She appeared in the doorway, still in her cafeteria uniform, dark circles under her eyes testament to her exhaustion. But when she saw the papers on the table, her face transformed, hope lighting her features in a way that made her look years younger. "Is that?" She began stepping closer. Marcus nodded, unable to contain his smile. "I got it, Mom. The Winter Scholarship. Full tuition to any college I want." For a moment, she stood frozen, one hand pressed to her mouth. Then, with a small sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, she crossed the kitchen and pulled him into a fierce hug. "I knew it," she whispered against his hair, her voice thick with emotion. "I always knew you were destined for more than this place." Marcus returned her embrace, his own eyes stinging with unexpected tears. For so long, he had carried the weight of their circumstances alone, believing it was his responsibility to remain small and undemanding, to cause no additional worry. Now, with his mother's arms around him and the scholarship papers on the table behind them, that burden began to lift. "There's more," he said when they finally separated. "The scholarship includes money for you too, so you don't have to work so many shifts while I'm in college." She shook her head in disbelief, scanning the papers he handed her. Marcus, this is extraordinary. How did this happen? You didn't even apply." So he told her about Theodore Winters and his unusual selection process, about the test, withdrew in the calculator, about Ms. Barker and Principal Davis stepping in to defend him, about Eliza and her brother who had also received the scholarship. As he spoke, his mother's expression shifted from confusion to wonder to a fierce pride that made his chest tighten with emotion. "And," he finished, "Eliza's family invited us both to dinner tonight to celebrate." "Her mom called you?" His mother nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Diana Navarro. Lovely woman. We talked for quite a while yesterday. She's picking us both up at 6. Marcus blinked in surprise. "Both of us? You're coming too?" "Of course I am," she said, her smile widening. "Did you think I'd miss celebrating the moment my son's life changed forever? Besides," she added with a hint of mischief he rarely saw, "Diana and I have plans of our own." "Plans?" Marcus echoed, suddenly wary. "What kind of plans?" His mother patted his cheek affectionately. "The kind that mothers make when they want good things for their children. Now go get ready. I need to shower and change before dinner." As she disappeared into the bathroom, Marcus was left with the distinct impression that his carefully controlled life was rapidly spinning beyond his management. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a threat. Instead, it felt like possibility. The Navarro home was nothing like Marcus had imagined. Based on the sleek car and Eliza's casual mentions of her mother's job as a hospital administrator, he had expected something imposing. A large house in one of Bridgeford's upscale neighborhoods, perhaps, with the kind of manicured perfection that appeared in magazines. Instead, Diana Navarro pulled into the driveway of a modest craftsman-style home in a middle-class neighborhood not far from Bridgeford High. The house was painted a cheerful yellow with blue trim, the front yard dominated by an enormous oak tree strung with fairy lights that twinkled in the early evening darkness. "Home sweet home," Diana announced as they parked. "Nothing fancy, but we love it." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. Walls covered in family photos, bookshelves overflowing with well-worn volumes. It smelled of garlic and tomatoes and something baking, the unmistakable scent of a home where cooking happened regularly and with love. Eliza bounded down the stairs as they entered, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "You're here!" Perfect timing. Miguel just arrived too. As if on cue, a tall young man appeared from the direction of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. With the same dark eyes as Eliza, but a more serious expression, he approached with his hand extended. "Miguel Navarro," he introduced himself, shaking first Marcus's hand, then his mother's. "Eliza's been talking non-stop about you, Marcus. Another Winters scholar. Welcome to the club." "Miguel's studying astrophysics at MIT," Eliza said, obvious pride in her voice. "He's basically a genius." Miguel rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Says the girl who built a functioning robot at 14? The easy banter between siblings, the casual warmth of the home, the way Diana immediately drew Marcus's mother into conversation as they moved toward the kitchen, it all created an atmosphere so different from the quiet, careful existence Marcus was accustomed to that he found himself momentarily overwhelmed. "You okay?" Eliza asked quietly, noticing his hesitation. "I know it can be a lot. My family's kind of enthusiastic." Marcus nodded, finding his voice. "It's nice. Really nice. Just different from what I'm used to." She smiled understandingly. "Come on, let's help set the table before Mom puts us all to work in the kitchen." The evening unfolded in a blur of warm food, laughter, and conversation that flowed as freely as the sparkling cider Diana served in wine glasses to make it festive. Miguel shared stories about MIT and the network of Winters scholars that existed across various universities. A loose-knit community of students selected by the same mysterious process, all bound by the common experience of having been chosen for their character rather than conventional achievements. "There are only about 50 of us total," he explained as they lingered over Diana's homemade tiramisu. "Winters has been doing this for almost 20 years, but he's incredibly selective. We have a private online forum where we can connect, share resources, even find internships with each other. It's like a secret society, except instead of being elite and exclusive, it's about helping each other succeed and paying it forward," Diana added, refilling Marcus's mother's cider glass. "That's the real purpose behind the scholarship, isn't it, Miguel? Not just to help deserving students, but to create a network of people committed to the same values Theodore Winters believes in." Miguel nodded, his expression turning serious. "The only real requirement of the scholarship, besides maintaining decent grades, is that each recipient commits to creating their own version of the program someday. Not necessarily a scholarship, but some way of identifying and supporting people with strong character who might otherwise be overlooked." Marcus absorbed this information slowly, the weight of it settling alongside the other revelations of the past 2 days. The scholarship wasn't just financial assistance, it was an invitation into a community, a philosophy, a way of moving through the world that extended far beyond his 4 years of college. "Is that why it's kept so secretive?" his mother asked. "To prevent people from trying to game the system?" "Partly," Miguel agreed. "But it's also because Winters believes that true character reveals itself when people think no one is watching. The moment the tests become known, they lose their effectiveness as a measure of genuine integrity. So everyone at this table has been secretly evaluating my son?" There was an edge to his mother's voice now, a hint of the fierce protectiveness that Marcus knew all too well. Diana reached across the table to place a reassuring hand on her arm. "Not evaluating, Lynn. Recognizing. There's a difference. We saw in Marcus what you've always seen. Someone special, someone with the kind of integrity that deserves to be supported and celebrated. The tension in his mother's shoulders eased slightly. I just don't like the idea of him being tested without his knowledge. Mom, Marcus said quietly, it's okay. I'm glad it happened this way. He looked around the table, at Eliza's encouraging smile, at Miguel's thoughtful expression, at Diana's warm hospitality. If I'd known it was a test, maybe I would have made different choices. This way, it was just me being me. A look of pride crossed his mother's face, so intense it almost hurt to see. You're right. Of course you're right. And being you is exactly what got you here. To Marcus, Miguel said suddenly, raising his glass. The newest winter scholar. May your journey be as transformative as mine has been. As glasses clinked around the table, Marcus felt something shift inside him. A new understanding of himself and his place in the world. For years, he had defined himself by what he lacked. Money, social status, the right clothes, the right address. Now surrounded by people who saw beyond those surface details to the person beneath, he began to recognize that perhaps his worth had never been tied to those things at all. Later, as his mother chatted with Diana in the living room, and Eliza argued good-naturedly with Miguel about the latest Star Wars film, Marcus slipped outside onto the front porch for a moment of quiet. The November night was cold but clear, stars visible in patches between the bare branches of the oak tree. He leaned against the porch railing, breath clouding in the chilly air, and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of 48 hours. The soft click of the door opening behind him announced Miguel's presence before the older boy spoke. Mind some company? He asked, joining Marcus at the railing. Marcus shook his head, strangely comfortable with Miguel, despite having just met him. Perhaps it was the shared experience of the scholarship, or simply the fact that Miguel treated him as an equal rather than a charity case. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the occasional car pass on the quiet street. It's overwhelming at first, Miguel said finally. The scholarship, the attention, the way everything changes so quickly. Marcus nodded, grateful for the understanding. Yesterday morning, I was just trying to get through another day without Drew Callahan making my life miserable. Now I'm planning for college and having dinner with people I barely know who somehow seem to know me better than most of my classmates. Miguel chuckled softly. Yeah, that sounds about right. For me, it was trying to avoid the gang recruiters in my neighborhood. Then suddenly Theodore Winters shows up at my school, and 2 years later I'm studying the cosmos at MIT. He shook his head, still seeming slightly amazed by the trajectory of his own life. It doesn't stop feeling surreal, by the way, but you get used to it. How did he test you? Marcus asked, curiosity overcoming his usual reserve. If that's not too personal. Not at all. Mine was different from yours, but the core was the same. A test of character when I thought no one was watching. Miguel leaned against the railing, eyes distant with memory. I found a wallet in the school bathroom. A lot of cash inside, like several $100s. No ID, nothing to identify the owner. Just the money. What did you do? Turned it into the office, Miguel said simply. Even though that money could have helped my family a lot, even though there was no way anyone would have known if I'd kept it. He shrugged. It didn't even feel like a choice, really. It wasn't mine, so I couldn't keep it. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. His own refusal to steal the calculator had felt the same way. Not a difficult moral decision, but simply the only option his conscience would allow. The next day, Miguel continued, I got called to the principal's office. Theodore Winters was there. Turns out he had arranged for the wallet to be planted with school administration's cooperation. It was my test and apparently I passed. That seems more deliberate than what happened to me, Marcus observed. Drew wasn't working for Winters. The tests are all different, Miguel explained. Sometimes Winters creates the scenario directly, like with me. Other times, he or his representatives simply observe how potential candidates respond to naturally occurring ethical challenges. From what Eliza told me, you've been on his radar for a while. The thought that Theodore Winters, or someone working for him, had been watching him, evaluating his character in moments when he thought himself unobserved, should have felt invasive. Instead, Marcus found it oddly validating. Someone had seen value in the quiet integrity he maintained, even when it brought him no visible reward. Can I ask you something else? Marcus said after another moment of silence. Sure. Is it worth it? The scholarship, the community, all of it. Does it really change things the way it seems like it will? Miguel considered the question carefully before answering. It changes the external circumstances dramatically. That's the obvious part. The financial freedom, the education, the doors that open. But the more important change happens internally. He turned to face Marcus directly. For me, the real value was finally believing that the qualities I'd been taught to value, honesty, integrity, compassion, actually mattered in the real world. That character really could overcome circumstance. Marcus absorbed this, recognizing the truth in it. Already in just 2 days, his perception of himself had begun to shift. From someone defined by his limitations to someone defined by his choices and character. There will still be hard days, Miguel continued. Days when you doubt yourself, when you wonder if you really deserve what you've been given. The imposter syndrome is real. He smiled slightly. But then you remember that your place in this community wasn't given because of your grades or your background or anything you could fake. It was earned through actions that came from the core of who you are. The door opened again, spilling warm light onto the porch as Eliza stuck her head out. There you are. Mom's bringing out hot chocolate, and she said to tell you both that your mysterious brooding moment is officially over. Miguel laughed, the serious mood broken. We're coming. Just imparting some winter scholar wisdom. Eliza rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh great, he's doing the wise mentor thing again. Don't let him fool you, Marcus. 2 years ago, he was just as clueless as the rest of us. As they followed her back inside to the warmth and light of the Navarro home, Marcus felt a sense of possibility unfurling within him. Not just for his academic future, but for the kind of life he might build beyond it. A life defined not by what he lacked, but by what he offered. A life where integrity and character weren't just abstract virtues to be maintained in private, but tangible assets recognized and valued by a community that shared his values. A bullied teen refused to steal, the newspaper headline had proclaimed, but the real story, Marcus was beginning to understand, wasn't about what he had refused to do. It was about what he had chosen to be, even when he thought no one was watching. And that choice, that quiet, unheroic adherence to his own moral compass, had opened a door to a future brighter than anything he had dared to imagine. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the crowded gymnasium of Bridgeford High, the acceptance letter from MIT clutched in his hand. Around him, other seniors compared their college admissions results with varying degrees of excitement and disappointment. The traditional college acceptance day celebration was in full swing, with banners representing various universities hanging from the ceiling and tables set up where admitted students could collect school merchandise and information packets. My tea, Eliza squealed, bouncing on her toes beside him. I knew it. Did you tell Miguel yet? He's going to be so excited to have you there next year. Marcus nodded, still somewhat dazed by the reality of the thick acceptance package he'd received that morning. I texted him right after I opened it. He already started looking for 2-bedroom apartments near campus. The plan to room with Miguel had developed over the past months, as their friendship grew through weekly video calls and the online Winter Scholars Forum. The older boy had become something of a mentor to Marcus, helping him navigate not just the college application process, but also his shifting social position at Bridgeford High. Because things had changed dramatically since that November day when Theodore Winters had appeared in Conference Room B, Drew Callahan's suspension and subsequent probation had altered the social dynamics of the school in subtle but significant ways. Without their leader's protection, Drew's friends had quickly disbanded, many of them revealing themselves to be reluctant participants in his bullying campaigns all along. More surprising was Drew himself. The formal apology he had been required to write to Marcus had seemed genuine, displaying a level of reflection that Marcus wouldn't have thought possible from the other boy. They weren't friends. Too much history lay between them for that. But the active hostility had been replaced by a cautious, mutual respect. And Marcus, no longer defining himself by his invisibility, had gradually emerged from his self-imposed isolation. The science club, the robotics team, even the school newspaper. He had joined each with Eliza's encouragement, discovering talents and interests he had previously suppressed in his effort to remain unnoticed. There you are, Ms. Barker's voice broke through his thoughts as she approached, beaming with pride. My tea. I knew they'd be lucky to have you. Thank you, Marcus said, meaning it for far more than just her congratulations. In the months since the scholarship, Ms. Barker had become one of his strongest advocates, encouraging him to apply for advanced science competitions and writing glowing recommendation letters for his college applications. Have you told Mr. Winters yet? She asked, lowering her voice slightly. I'm sure he'd be pleased to know his investment is going to such a prestigious institution. Marcus shook his head. I haven't seen him since that day in November. Theodore Winters had returned to his reclusive ways after their meeting, though Marcus occasionally received formal correspondence from the Winters Foundation regarding his scholarship disbursements. Well, I have it on good authority that he follows the progress of his scholars quite closely, Miss Barker said with a knowing smile, even if he does so from a distance. As she moved on to congratulate other students, Eliza nudged Marcus gently. Speaking of following your progress, there's someone else who's going to be over the moon about MIT. She nodded toward the gymnasium entrance, where Marcus's mother had just arrived, still wearing her cafeteria uniform, but with a light in her eyes that had grown steadily brighter over the past months. The scholarship's family support fund had already allowed her to reduce her hours, taking Sundays off for the first time in years. The difference in her was visible. Less exhaustion in her face, more energy in her step, a newfound hope that mirrored what Marcus himself was feeling. He waved, watching as she navigated through the crowd toward them, accepting congratulations from teachers who had come to know her through parent conferences and school events she could now attend. "My tea?" she asked as she reached them, though the envelope in his hand made the answer obvious. Marcus nodded, and she pulled him into a fierce hug. Public display of affection be damned. "I am so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. So incredibly proud. Over her shoulder, Marcus caught sight of a familiar figure standing near the back of the gymnasium. An elderly man in an impeccable suit, observing the proceedings with quiet interest. Theodore Winters. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room, and the older man gave a small, dignified nod of acknowledgement before turning to leave as unobtrusively as he had arrived. The moment was so brief that Marcus might have thought he imagined it, except for the quiet certainty that settled in his chest. Winters had come to witness this milestone, this confirmation that his investment in Marcus's character was bearing fruit. What are you looking at?" his mother asked, following his gaze to the now empty doorway. "Just the future," Marcus replied, smiling at her confusion, "and all the possibilities it holds." As the celebration continued around them, Eliza chattering excitedly about visiting him at MIT, his mother already planning what he would need for his dorm room, classmates stopping by to offer congratulations. Marcus felt the weight of the acceptance letter in his hand. It represented so much more than admission to a prestigious university. It was tangible proof that a single choice made with integrity, even when he thought no one was watching, had altered the course of his life. A bullied teen had refused to steal, passing a secret test that won him far more than just a college scholarship. It had won him a community, a future, and most importantly, a new understanding of his own worth, one measured not by the circumstances he was born into, but by the character he chose to build, one small decision at a time. And that, Marcus reflected as he looked around at the people who had become his supporters and friends, was the most valuable scholarship of all.